Is Barrett with us yet? You guys see Barrett? Oh, there he is. Barrett, are you traveling? You up in Delaware?
I'm up in Pennsylvania right now.
Oh, in Pennsylvania. Very, very cool. Let me introduce this gentleman. I have known Barrett feels like all my life. Barrett is like a brother to me. We actually had the opportunity to coach Barrett for a little while, which he'll tell you was challenging. Yeah, there's that big old Barrett smile. Let me give you just a little bit of background about Barrett if you don't know Barrett. If you are familiar with scaling up Rockefeller habits, when Vern tells the story of the X Factor in that book, this is the guy that he's talking about. He also has an HBR article completely published around this. You can go look it up. Maybe we can find it and put the link in chat. So he's like Harvard official. So he's really, really important. Entrepreneur at a very early age. All this guy's ever known how to do is to go create and build stuff. Most of you are Petra members with us. And when you did SWAT, I tell this story all the time, by the way, Barrett. When you did SWAT as an organization, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and you got to the opportunities box, opportunities are things that if you could go do them over the next 24 to 36 months, you could double the business, right? Barrett gave me 60 sticky notes. There are 60 opportunities that we go take advantage of these. Like it was an astounding moment. And I think from an entrepreneurial background, it's one that when you get to that opportunities bucket, you just thrive in that particular space. And Mike just wrapped up with us. You didn't see that, Barrett, but he talked a lot about industry bottlenecks, which I know you're going to take and turn into an actual advantage. And his comment or the words he uses, what do people hate the most about your industry? Identify what do people hate the most about your industry? And I know you're going to pick up on that on the other side. So catch us up to where you are, what you're doing, Barrett, and we'll get this presentation started.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I'm on my third startup today, a company called Organics, and our purpose is to revolutionize the way the world grows by helping to reduce nitrates, phosphates, and pesticides, improving soil health and plant health. Our customers are lawn care companies, golf courses, sports turf, but also agriculture, and that's our fastest growing market. And actually, this year represents more than half of our revenue. And so we're helping farmers produce more while using less, make more money, put money back in their pocket, reduce fertilizer runoff into our waterways. And so we're really excited about our mission and what we're doing with Organics. And we got here, frankly, through an evolution of businesses that I have started and sold. And at each business, I used the methodologies that I'm going to be talking about today to run those businesses, find our key strategy, and scale those businesses and ultimately sell them. It's not always an easy road. It's not always a straight path as I've grown these companies, but through resiliency and persistence, we always find a way to break through and indeed revolutionize the industries that we're in. And so really excited to be doing what I'm doing right now because I think we can have a real impact on the planet and make the world a better place. And again, we got there with the very tools I'm going to be speaking about today.
All right, well, let's jump in. You've got a slide deck to pull up, I think, and share your screen. Yep. And we're going to be in the Ascent playbook, page 12. You can take notes as we go along. There's actually some work tools that Barrett sent us that are in that playbook. So jump into that as Barrett gets started.
All right. So we good with the presentation right now? You guys see it?
Solid.
Perfect. Okay, great. Well, thanks, Andy, for giving me the opportunity to share my story with your group. I love Petra. Petra's been a tremendous friend to me and my business. And through some of our most difficult times when I kind of didn't know what to do, that's when I tap Andy on the shoulder and either, get a quick huddle or in one case, we brought him on as our coach for an extended period of time to help us navigate some treacherous water. So Petra's been an insurmountable asset to us as we've gone through our journey. And so I'm grateful for Petra and happy to get back to the community if I can. So what I'm going to talk about today is finding your industry bottleneck. Just like Mike said, that one thing about your industry that you just hate. If you could eliminate that one thing, it could allow you to grow from infinity, from here to infinity. And so we're going to look for those industry bottlenecks, and we're going to teach you a process on how to evaluate your industry from multiple points of view, and you're going to create a big list of industry bottlenecks. Ultimately, I'm going to teach you a process that we're going to go through it at a very fast pace, not to basically get through it today. In other words, I don't think we're going to have time to actually do the process. We're going to have time to review the process so that you can take it back to your teams and spend what I would recommend 2 to 4 hours running through this exact same process with a lot more depth. So I'm going to teach you how to do the process, give you some examples of companies that have found their X factors and how they changed their industries and got a significant competitive advantage. And we get there just what Mike said, by finding our industry bottlenecks. And so that's why we call the presentation Break Your Industry Bottleneck. So let's start off with kind of this provocative slide, depending on, how you see things politically. We remember Joe Biden getting up there and saying inflation is transitory. And everybody kind of giggles about that today because it seems like it's here to stay. But I am here to tell you that it absolutely is not here to stay. It absolutely is transitory. There's nothing that any kind of policies can do, frankly, to continue to ramp up inflation, because there is a opposing force that is happening at the same time, and it is happening faster and faster and faster and more powerful every single day, and that is technology innovation. And technology innovation can be, like the invention of Zoom or creating some new rocket ship. But technology innovation can also just be a different way of doing your business, a different process. It doesn't have to be a supercomputer. But here's the deal. Every industry is in a state of disruption. And it's not just the fact that we're all in disruptive economies in all of our industries. It's the velocity of disruption. It's the speed of change that we have to deal with in our industries. And as we continue to evolve and continue to have this technological innovation and this disruption, technology innovation is inherently deflationary. So that's why I say inflation really is transitory. Now, how long is that transition? That we don't know for sure. But what I can tell you is that the technological innovation that is happening is on a geometric curve. Technology innovation is doubling in its impact and having its cost every 16 months, just like Moore's law. AI is a big driver of that right now. We're at the very beginning of an AI revolution that's going to morph what the computer revolution did in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And so as you see these things happen, they're going to make things cheaper and cheaper. And just as a very simplistic example, think about a 70-inch flat screen TV. 6-7 years ago, you had to be an NBA player and you probably put it up on your Instagram because you're so proud of the fact you got this new 70-inch TV. Today, Best Buy will come out, deliver it to your house, and hang it on your wall for $500. That same 70-inch TV used to cost $5,000 not that long ago. Technology and technological innovation drove the cost of that TV down. And it's happening in all of our industries, and it will over the next 20 years. And so inflation is here for now. It's a significant opportunity if we look at it right. And the very companies that will solve inflation are the ones that are going to adopt innovation and this very process we're going to talk about today. And those are the entrepreneurial companies that Petra works with. They're the ones that are going to make their products better, cheaper, safer, faster, more convenient, and add value in the world the way that add new value in the world the way it's never been happened before. And as we continue to do that, just like that big screen TV got less expensive, we're gonna continue to do that in our industries. In some cases, that means we lower prices. In some cases, that means we increase margins. Hopefully, we get to increase margins for a while before the competition catches up to us, and then we have to lower prices and come up with our next innovation. But that's our job as entrepreneurs, is to consistently go out and find the next industry bottleneck and continue to add value through our companies, through our entrepreneur organizations, by solving problems in a way that nobody's ever done before. And we're going to give you that methodology here. So more on that disruptive economy, and just an example of, kind of an industry that's been disrupted that you can all see and kind of giggle about. I mean, I'm a car guy. I love muscle cars and old cars. This Dodge Hellcat Challenger, 707 horsepower. The one they have out now today is actually 777 horsepower. But the point is, that's the best muscle car that has, it's the ultimate incremental evolution of muscle cars from the 60s to today. And they got a little bit better every single year, a little bit faster, a little bit more powerful. And here is the ultimate result of that long-term incremental improvement of the muscle car. And it's a cool car. It goes in a straight line really fast, and that's what it's designed to do, and smokes its tires. Now, let's compare that 30-year, 40-year incremental incremental improvement of doing things the way they've always done them, just a little bit better every year, with Tesla, who comes out with basically a modified golf cart that they've turned into a very sophisticated electrical car that burns no fuel. Which car goes? The Hellcat's only mission in life is to do the quarter mile as fast as possible. Which car does the quarter mile faster? The minivan by Tesla or the Challenger? Well, the minivan actually goes quarter mile faster than the Challenger, and it'll go 0 to 100 faster. It'll go 0 to 60 faster. Does it all while getting better than the equivalent of 100 miles to the gallon on fuel, and you can put your kids in the back of it. So think about how Tesla came into the industry and just totally disrupted the automotive industry. Even though the GM and Ford and Dodge were getting better and better and better every single year, they didn't. They just got better and better at doing the same thing. And Tesla came in and did it in a whole new way and totally disrupted the industry. And now today it's more valuable than Toyota and Volkswagen combined. And I'm going to tell you, a lot of people laugh about that and say, "Wow, how could it possibly be worth that much money? It's ridiculous. It's all hype." I'm going to tell you it's not. In fact, I think it's undervalued. And you're going to watch Tesla continue to disrupt the way we transport ourselves. And there's some studies that are saying that by 2030, we will only drive cars out of kind of novelty and luxury. Everything will be rideshare, and it'll be rideshare in an autonomous electric car. Who's going to lead that transition from the way we operate vehicles today to the autonomous rideshare phenomenon that's going to happen? Tesla is going to lead that, and they're going to lead it because they not only have this cool car that doesn't burn gasoline, but every single Tesla out there has 8 cameras on it, and there's more Teslas out there with 8 cameras doing autonomous driving right now than any other automotive company combined. All 8 cameras are constantly gathering data all the time. So what's Tesla doing is they're building the most data, so 7 to 10 times more data than anybody else has around all the information we need to have effective autonomous driving cars. Secondarily, if you go to buy a Model Y today, very, very soon you won't be able to buy a Model Y. They will only lease you a Model Y, the Tesla mid-size SUV. They're only going to lease you a Model Y. How come? Because Elon Musk knows that he needs a fleet of autonomous taxis that he's going to put into the market as soon as the technology and the laws are ready. And so as you turn in your Tesla Model Y that you just paid him for, he depreciated, and then he used it to gather all of his data, he's then going to turn it into an autonomous. He's going to have a fleet of 20 million Model Ys that are going to be ready to go into an autonomous fleet of taxi cabs, and it's going to totally change our way we transport ourselves again. So when you look at these kind of trends that he's driving and how so much further ahead he is, he's playing chess and everybody else is playing checkers. That's why he's worth. That's why the company's worth so much money, and that's why it's going to continue to disrupt things. Now, I'm a car guy. I'm always going to be driving. I'm not going to get in an autonomous thing, but I'm going to elect to do that. And it's going to be 10 times more expensive for me to do that than it would be for me to just do an electric ride share. So this disruptive economy and the velocity of disruption is affecting every single one of us. I don't care if you're in automotive, if you're in computers, if you run a machine shop, or in my case, I've always been in the turf industry. All of these industries are being disrupted, and we can't get away from it. So we've got a choice. We can be the disruptors, or we can be the disrupted. And I'm going to tell you right here that if you can adopt the innovation process that we're going to speak about today and make it part of your rhythm and your culture, then you can be the disruptor. And as entrepreneurial growth firms that we all represent, we are the ones that can do it better than the big, kind of established incumbent, because they can't change what they've always done. Ford, it was almost impossible for them to go from an internal combustion engine into an electric scenario. They had to be forced into it because it's not what they do. It's not who they are. But as entrepreneurial firms, we can adapt and change quicker than the big guys. And as a result, we can create significant value, capture market share, and change the world. So for the next 45 minutes as we go through this, I want you to be thinking about being an innovator. And an innovator doesn't see, it's not about seeing what is. Okay, it's not the state of what things are today. It's about asking the question, and the power comes from the question. Asking the question, how can I find a greater potential from every situation, every person, every process, every experience, every outcome? So how can I look at things and say, how can I find greater potential from this? It doesn't mean that the answers are always going to jump out at you, but if you look at a problem, you say, I can't do that. Well, then you're guaranteed not to do that. But if you look at a problem and say, how can I do that? How can I solve that? You might not come up with the answer, but you got a lot more leverage by approaching it with a passion for possibilities and asking that question, how can I find greater potential? So that's what an innovator is, and we want to have that kind of mindset as we go through this presentation and as you go through it with your groups. So I want to give credit where credit's due. This idea around the X factor was introduced to me by Vern Harnish back in when I went to the EMP program, part of the EO educational initiatives. That's actually where I met Andy as well. And Mike was in the EMP program with me, Mike Maddock, that you just heard. Vern was our teacher, and he taught us this idea around the X factor. And the way he defined it back then was creative innovation that leads to a 7 to 10 times competitive advantage in your marketplace. Now, if Vern was here today, he'd correct me and he'd say, no, it's 70 to 100 times competitive advantage in the marketplace. And so he likes to really bring it out a much bigger framework and a much bigger lens today. But I like still thinking around 7 to 10. It doesn't mean you can't think bigger. But 7 to 10 is big enough that we have to totally change what we're doing. But it's within, it almost feels within grasp. When you start saying 70 to 100 times, often that just seems so far away. So I like to think 7 to 10. But give credit where credit's due. Vern Harnish introduced me to this concept. The process we're going to speak about is one that I've developed over the years of doing this with working with companies and running this process through my own company and doing lots of speaking engagements like we're doing today. So when you do this with your team, it's going to be very important for you to establish the idea to understand the difference between execution and innovation. Now, both ideas are critically important to have a thriving, successful business. And a lot of what Petra teaches us is how to be better executors. And it's critically important. If we are not good executors within our business plan, we will eventually go out of business. So it's just absolute. That's like breathing. You got to be better and better at executing every single day. And I'm not minimizing that at all. The problem is when we get into our entrepreneurial companies that are growing and busy, and we never have enough people and never have enough hours in a day, we get so bogged down in execution that we frequently don't have the discipline to carve out a little bit of time for innovation thinking, because you can't think about execution and innovation at the same time. Now, it's going to be important when you sit down with your groups and run through this process that you establish the difference between execution and innovation. Execution is a business bottleneck, is how I like to look at it in a simplistic way. So it's a problem that you have in your business, but do your top 3 competitors also have that problem? If they do not, if you can say, no, my top 3 competitors have solved this problem, then it's a problem that you have in your business, but it's not an industry problem. It's not a place where you're going to get innovation thinking. You have to solve those problems or you're going to be in trouble, but it's not where you're going to get that significant exponential leverage. You're going to get incremental improvement, and that's going to be important. And if you keep doing that over and over again, eventually it does compound and give you significant leverage. But we're going to be looking for industry bottlenecks, which is where you get the exponential leverage versus the incremental. And an industry bottleneck is a bottleneck that you have in your business, and so do your top 3 competitors. So that's the filter. Do our top 3 competitors have it? If they do, it's likely an industry bottleneck. If our top 3 competitors don't have that problem, but we do, it's probably a business bottleneck, one you need to solve. So an example of a business bottleneck might be, hey, if I had the right CFO, then I could really scale my business. If I had the right warehousing, then I could really scale my business. Well, there are problems that I have to solve in my company, and they're real problems in my company. And as I do, I'll be able to scale the business larger and more successfully. But my top competitors, Monsanto or Bayer today, the ones that bought Monsanto, they have those problems solved. So it's not an industry bottleneck; it's a business bottleneck. Now, an industry bottleneck is one where we have that problem, and so do our top 3 competitors. And so for my space, I'm in the fertilizer. We manufacture organic fertilizer. One of the industry bottlenecks we have is we have to move lots of volume of material across country in order to get it to our customers. All of our biggest competitors have to move lots of volume of material across large areas, geographic areas. So there's a big shipping component that is hard for everybody to get the product to the customer. And it adds cost and doesn't add value. That's an industry bottleneck that we're trying to solve. And so that's an example of an industry bottleneck versus a business bottleneck. Now, get that idea clear. And by the way, when you sit down with your teams and you start going through what we're going to talk about next around these 5 diagnostic levers and finding your industry bottlenecks, the first thing your team will do is tell you about all their business bottlenecks. That's what they live every day. They can't stop thinking about it. They're going to think they're telling you about an industry bottleneck, and then you're going to ask them, do our top 3 competitors have this? They're going to say no, and you're like, that's a business bottleneck. You're going to have to go through that exercise with them to teach them the difference and to have them actually see it live. Let them write down all their business bottlenecks on a sticky note, put it up on the wall. That's going to be your parking lot of things you need to work on at your next Petra meeting. But it's not what you're going to work on when you're trying to do your X Factor process. So we're going to look at your industry through the what I call the 5 diagnostic levers, and basically when I came up with this, I thought about what are the empathetic lenses that we can view our industries from different people that are involved in the value chain. And a lot of times, if let's just say I'm a sales and marketing oriented CEO, so I always automatically go to sales and marketing bottlenecks because that's just how I think. But if I don't look at it through these 5 diagnostic levers, then I'm always going to come up with sales and marketing bottlenecks because that's just my background. But if we can go through these diagnostic levers, we're going to see our industries from different points of view, and that's why we do it this way. So we're going to review the workbook that's in your session here at the end. Right now, I'm just going to go through it at a high level. You don't need to be thinking about the workbook directly. But in the workbook, we will be going through, and this is what you'll do with your teams, finding 5 bottlenecks from each one of these diagnostic levers, each one of these empathetic views within your value chain. And so you'll have a list of 25 bottlenecks at the end of the exercise, and you'll come up with your number 1 bottleneck within each diagnostic lever. So you'll have a list of 25, and then a list of your top 5, and then you'll have your number 1. So if you have 5 bottlenecks that seem juicy and ones you can really go and start to work on, you'll have, and we like to work on an industry bottleneck for at least 90 days. Sometimes we can work on it much longer than that, but at least 90 days. So even if you went through them every 90 days, you'd have more than a year's worth of bottlenecks in your top 5, and you can use them to continue to drive innovation in your companies. So let's talk about these different diagnostic levers, and that HBR article will also take you through this whole process in more detail than we're going to be able to do today. So it'll be more of a guide for you, and if you want to really dive into that, I'd suggest you download that and use that as a framework to help you go through this process. So let's look at some companies and I'm going to show you the diagnostic levers. Let me just go back and just review this real quick just to give you a little bit more background. So the diagnostic levers, number 1 is eliminating expenses. So look at your P&L. What are the top 5 expenses on your P&L? And just think for a second. Again, you got to have a passion for possibilities. Don't say I can't do that. What if we could reduce our top 5 expenses by a factor of 7 to 10 times? Now, it's not just about cutting an expense. It's about looking at the numerator and denominator that's associated with that expense. So as an example, most of us have labor as one of our top 10 or top 5 expenses. If we got our team around and we said, hey, what if we could reduce our labor costs by 7 to 10 times? We might not get a lot of creative energy around that because people are going to be looking around thinking if they're still going to have a job. It's not about cutting heads necessarily. It's more about what if we could create more revenue per employee, 7 to 10 times more revenue per employee. What if we could create 7 to 10 times more gross margin per employee? So it's about looking at the numerator denominator ratio and making it 7 to 10 times better, more efficient, cheaper, but cheaper as it relates to revenue and profit. So as we look at our P&L, think about your top 5 expenses and just ponder the idea. What if we could make them 7 to 10 times less expensive or more powerful from a profit perspective as it relates to expense? Then we're going to look at our customer buying and using experience. So what is getting in the way of our customers buying or using our product or service? Maybe it's making it hard for them to interface and get what they want when they want it. Maybe it's taking too long to get them what they want when they want it. Maybe they can't get the color, the size, the style that they want exactly when they want it. So what is getting in the way of our customers getting what they want when they want it? A lot of times this might have something to do with the supply and demand. So as a restaurant, Friday night at 7 o'clock, there's only so many tables in a restaurant. So what's getting in the way of the customer getting the nice dinner they want on Friday night at the fancy restaurant? Well, what's getting in the way is that everybody wants to eat at 7 o'clock on Friday night, and we only have so many tables. Okay, I'm not saying there's a quick, easy solution around that. What I am saying is that would be an example of an industry bottleneck in the restaurant business from the customer's using or buying experience. So then we look at psychological barriers. So what's getting in the way of your customers interfacing your product or service as much as you'd like them to, or as quickly as you'd like them to? That's a psychological barrier. They're either scared, they're confused, they're ashamed, they don't trust. So somewhere in there, there's something that's giving friction in the buying experience from the customer from their psychological point of view. So you think about life insurance. This is just a classic, simple one. Life insurance is actually death insurance, right? But they call it life insurance because they're trying to eliminate that psychological bottleneck. Nobody wants to talk about death, so I don't want to go talk about life insurance, so I put it off. That's an example of people want to protect their families if they were to pass away. The life insurance companies want to sell life insurance, but it's hard to get that conversation going because it's a psychological bottleneck around that conversation. Then look at winning hearts and minds. Now, in the workbook, it says disengaged employees. So when you look at the workbook and it says disengaged employees, I've expanded that to be winning the hearts and minds of any key constituency group. So it doesn't have to be employees. It often is employees, especially in the labor market we're experiencing these days. But it could also be a key influencer. It could be a key referral group. It could be a key vendor with a constrained supply. It could be something that if you won the hearts and minds of that group, could be an employee, could be external, it's going to significantly drive the efficiency and the growth of your company and change your industry. And then we look at eliminating negative externalities associated with the growth of your industry. So an example of this we've all seen, we all have these iPhones in our pockets and they're wonderful and they're elegant and they're beautiful and they don't cost very much. And Apple produces them through a contractor called Foxconn. And you all saw the expose where they had Foxconn employees that were so miserable they're jumping out of windows. And that was a direct cause of Apple trying to make more and more, being very, very successful at selling iPhones and needing to make more and more and more of them and getting the cost down and to the point where they were creating a negative labor environment with one of their contractors. And it really had a negative light on Apple for a short period of time until they fixed that. And so that's an example of Apple never thought about hurting these people. They thought they were creating jobs, but if they didn't do it in the right way and they didn't think about the negative externalities associated with the growth of our industry, it could shine a bad light on them and potentially put them out of business. So that's our five diagnostic levers, and we want to find 5 bottlenecks within each one of these diagnostic levers, and the workbook takes you through that. Give you some examples so that you can see this in live action in businesses that you may or may not have seen before. So Redbox, this is an old example, but I like it because it proves a couple of points. So back in the day, Blockbuster Video was the #1 video rental. If you wanted to rent a DVD, you went to Blockbuster at your local strip center and you rented a Blockbuster DVD. No, there was no other competition. They were 7 to 10 times bigger than any other movie rental company in the country, and nobody could compete with Blockbuster at doing what Blockbuster did, which is brick and mortar DVD rental. Redbox comes in 2000 and 2001, something like, and I forget the exact number, but it's order of magnitude, it's around this, 78% of all DVD rentals happen through a Blockbuster. By 2008, 67% of all DVD rentals happen through a Redbox. Think about that. That's a very short period of time. What did Redbox do? Well, think about you're working on your X Factor and you're at Blockbuster and you looked at your P&L and you said, hey, what's the top 5 expenses? Surely you'd see it pretty quickly. It would be labor and real estate. So what if we could reduce our labor and real estate costs by a factor of 7 to 10 times? Would that give us an advantage in our industry? Blockbuster didn't ask that question, but the answer was pretty darn simple. I mean, they had a Coke machine down the end of their hallway. We can argue that video on demand and Netflix and things like that really put Blockbuster out of business, but I will tell you that Redbox did it first, and Redbox did it in a way that any one of us could have implemented. I mean, I'm not that smart technology-wise, but I could put DVDs into a Coke machine. Like, I could figure that out. And that's a great example of using an innovation that somebody else had already figured out in another industry and applying it to your industry. The Coke machine was invented in 1923. The vending machine was invented by Coca-Cola in 1923. So that was a massive innovation in 1923, yet it was still a tool that Redbox used to displace Blockbuster and reduce overhead and labor by 7 to 10 times. And in fact, by 2010, Blockbuster went bankrupt. Remember, 2008 was when Redbox had 2/3 of the video rentals, and by 2010, Blockbuster was no more. So it's a great example of disrupting an industry giant by doing it in a whole different way and thinking through a P&L bottleneck, a P&L-oriented bottleneck, superfluous expenses. So I also like to use this example because it shows this idea that I call synthesized innovation. So that's where you look at another industry and say, who else has solved a bottleneck in another industry that's similar to the one I'm asking about my industry? And could I use that innovation, maybe I have to tweak it, repurpose it somehow, but through R&D, rip off and duplicate, could I use that innovation in my industry and actually change my industry, and I don't have to reinvent the wheel because somebody's already done it. And the vending machine by Coca-Cola is a great example with Redbox of synthesized innovation. Here's another example of synthesized innovation. Little Caesars was able to gain market share during COVID quicker than any of their competitors. And one of the ways they did it was this hot and ready zone, which essentially is that stainless steel cabinet on the end of the counter there. You were able to go into a Little Caesars during COVID, and they had their top 3 pizzas, and every 10 minutes they'd put fresh pizzas in. If it was more than 10 minutes, they would replace them. So it's always hot and piping hot, the pizza that you want. You don't have to call them in advance and order it. You don't have to wait for them to get it together. You never had to talk to a person or touch a person. You went to your kiosk, you put your credit card in, you pulled your pizza out, you moved on. It was hot, it was fresh, it was easy, and you didn't have to deal with any people. And Little Caesars took market share during COVID because they used a Coke machine vending machine idea with pizza. So it's another example of synthesized innovation. So let's take a look at this one. This is a great case study of a wine brand that came in and dominated a market where there was already a lot of incumbents that were really dominating the market. It was hard to break into. So the wine industry, when this little startup called Casilla Winery, which the brand is Yellowtail, their parent company is called Casilla. Yellowtail comes into the market in the first part of the 2000s as a startup wine brand. The average wine retailer, the store that you go into to buy your wine, had an average number of choices of 162 different options of wine that you could buy in your average wine store. 162. So think about that. There's 2 basic categories: get drunk cheap, box wine and jug wine, and then some version of this. What I have this example up here is Louis Latour Grand Cru, and so that's if there's any wine snobs in the group here, I meant to say connoisseurs. They will appreciate the Louis Latour Grand Cru, and they will understand that where the vintage, this 2007 is a great year for this particular region in France, and there's 27 words on this bottle of Louis Latour that will appeal to that wine snob to let them know that this is the wine that they can take to their party and look like they know what they're talking about. But of course, they have to get Wine Spectator and read about it every single month in order to keep up with all this. And there's a bunch of people that love to do that. But there's a whole bunch of people that wanted to go in and buy wine and bring it to a party. But this Louis Latour verbiage or whatever version that they're looking at, whether it's a $100 bottle of wine or a $20 bottle of wine, they all use the same 27 words and the vintage and the region and the tannins, and they assume that you know what they're talking about to appeal to the wine connoisseur. But the average buyer wants to go buy a bottle of wine easy and fun and quick, and they would go into the wine store and they would get overwhelmed by 162 different choices. They weren't going to bring the get drunk cheap stuff because they didn't want to look like the get drunk cheap guy. So they would walk out of the wine store and go buy maybe a case of Heineken or a bottle of Tito's instead because it was just too confusing. Psychological bottleneck. It made it hard for people to understand what was a good bottle of wine. So what was the 7 to 10 times metric question that Yellowtail answered? Well, there's 27 words describing that bottle of Louis Latour. How many words are there in the bottle of Yellowtail? 3. 7 to 10. So it's 9 times less words on a bottle of Yellowtail than there is on a bottle of Louis Latour or any of the other competition. Not only do we not, keep in mind that Louis Latour, not only do we need to know it's from France, but we need to know what region of France it's from. And we need to know what year it was produced because that tells us all about the grapes and the tannins and whatever else is in that. The Yellowtail, not only do we not know what region it's from, we're not even 100% sure what country it's from. I mean, it's probably Australia because there's a kangaroo on it, but they don't say Australia, and it's no guarantee it's from Australia. Okay, so they just say Yellowtail Chardonnay. We don't know what year it was produced. We don't know what region it was produced. We don't know what country it was produced, and we don't care. Here's what we know. Yellowtail's easy to buy, easy to drink, and it's fun. Now, if you're a wine snob, you're laughing at me right now because that stuff is swill. Well, they didn't appeal to you, but they did appeal to a whole new market of people that were afraid to buy wine previous to Yellowtail coming into the market. They were the fastest growing wine brand from 2000 to 2010 and became the largest, most successful wine brand to hit the United States in 10 years by solving a psychological bottleneck. So what are you doing within your industries that's making it hard for people to buy, it's confusing them, it's making it so they don't trust, or they're embarrassed or confused about buying your product or service. And if you can make that 7 to 10 times, if you can solve that in a 7 to 10 times way, you're going to gain market share just like Yellowtail did. So the next one I'm going to show you here is Airbnb. Airbnb we've all seen and experienced. So look at the valuation of Airbnb versus Marriott, 130 versus 43 billion. Think about how complicated it is to build and operate a Marriott chain. Yet Airbnb comes in, they have they don't have any bricks, they don't have any people, they don't have any maid service or front desk people, and they've got a significantly more valuation because they're solving it in a whole different way. Now, this is an example of the shared economy, and that might be a way for you to get some leverage in your industry, but I don't want you to get so stuck on the shared economy. That was a strategy that Marriott used, not Marriott, Airbnb used to get their product to their customers 7 to 10 times cheaper than their competition. And they innovated their industry as a result. So what can you do to get your product or service to your customers for as close to zero as possible, or 7 to 10 times cheaper than you do now? And that's a bottleneck I'm actually working on within our fertilizer space. So here's a great example of a EO-oriented company. These guys were in our EMP class with Andy and I and Mike Maddock. O2E. O2E stands for Ordinary to Excellent. And so they've got several brands that they operate, but the one that you've all heard of is 1-800-GOT-JUNK. This is Brian Scudamore's company. 1-800-GOT-JUNK is their brand that you all know, but they've got 5 other brands that they're expanding into now. And that's why they go with the O2E umbrella. But what their real business is their industry is they're a franchisor of blue-collar home services. And so their competition is other franchisors of blue-collar home services. So as an example, Lawn Doctor would be a lawn care company that's a blue-collar home service franchise. 1-800-GOT-JUNK is competing for franchisees with Lawn Doctor, blue-collar home service-based businesses. So Brian Scudamore solved several bottlenecks through his evolution, and as a result, today has over $500 million in annual revenue. Think about that. When he was in EMP with Andy and I, he had 8 franchisees. One of them was doing $1 million. And now he's doing over $500 million. So one of my favorite bottlenecks that he solved was he said, how can we get our franchisees from 0 to $1 million and profitable 7 to 10 times faster than our competition? And so in the industry, blue collar home service franchisees, it takes an average of like 6.5 years to get a blue collar home, that industry to get a franchisee to go from 0 to $1 million and profitable, about 6.5 years. So Brian said, how can we do it in like 12 months? And they went like crazy to try to figure out how to do that. And they got their metric to 16 months. They didn't get to 12, but they got to 16 months. So think about it. If you're going to get a blue collar home based franchise, why would you ever go buy one that was going to take you 5 times, 7 times longer to become $1 million and profitable when you could get one that has already figured it out? And you've seen how they've done it in a whole bunch of ways. They're really good at free marketing because marketing is the #1 expense that you have to spend on a startup business to get to $1 million. And 1-800-GOT-JUNK is the master at free marketing. And you see their trucks parked in vacant lots, and you see their yard signs on all over the roads, and you see them newsjack all the time. And they are the premier people at getting exposure without paying for it. And they got obsessed about that because they needed to get their franchisees to $1 million and profitable quicker than anybody else. Let's take a look at this next one. This is fun. This is a group that I've just started working with my fertilizer business. So that these are the different brands that they run. So this is actually Brian Scudamore's. The group is called Southwind, and it's Brian Scudamore's largest franchisee. So they have 1-800-GOT-JUNK as one of their brands. They're doing something like $88 million just in 1-800-GOT-JUNK, which is just baffling to me. They also have a moving business, an HVAC business, and now they've added a lawn care division that I've partnered with them on. And so they're going to be using our product, and I own a piece of their Dream Lawn business. But here's what's exciting about Southwind. If you look at the top of this is right off of their website. If you look at the top, look at the search bar at the top, all the little icons you can pick. Entrepreneurship is one of them. What do you think the biggest bottleneck is? So they're not a franchise. They're not a franchisor. They're a franchisee, or in these other brands, they own them corporate owned. They're doing home service businesses, blue collar home service businesses with either low skill or in HVAC. It's obviously got a skill level to it, but it's all blue collar guys that are doing work that not everybody wants to do. And in this labor market, think about. I'm sure there's a bunch of people in that space right now. They're saying, labor, skilled labor, or even labor that will show up and smile and be able to drive down the road is impossible to find. And I would scale my business much faster if I could find the right labor. I can tell you that was often a problem when I grew I was in the lawn care space, and it was always a problem. These guys have solved that bottleneck. So remember I said disengaged employees or winning the hearts and minds? They figured out how to win the hearts and minds of that blue collar entry level worker. They've got over 1,000 people that are visiting. So these guys do $200 million system wide with all these brands. And they've got over 1,000 people that go out and visit homes every single day in 20 different markets running these brands. And they've got a waiting list of people to come and work for them. And they only lose people for the most part that they want to lose. How in the heck did they do that? And I mean, you're talking about junk removal? I mean, who wants to come in? I mean, that's a tough business. Moving? Who wants to move a refrigerator or a couch up steps for a living? So these are hard positions to fill, and they've filled them, and they've won the hearts and minds of that blue collar entry level worker. How did they do it? Well, look at that icon, it says entrepreneurship. So what they've done is you come in and start moving junk or moving furniture. That's your entryway. They have a path that you have to hit certain metrics, and you have to have satisfied customers and do your job well. And there's all kinds of ways they measure that. And if you do, you qualify for entrepreneur school. And they have a very specific program that they take you through. It's all internally run, where they teach you how to run a business and how to run a branch. And over a course of multiple years, you get your accreditation, like going to college in Southwind, and you earn sweat equity through each accreditation. And they give you the ability, and once you hit all those blocks, to go open your own branch anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country you want to do it. And you can pick from any of their brands. You could do lawn care, you could do junk, whatever. And they go and open up a brand. The Southwind organization finances that for you. And as you're now an entrepreneur. Now, within their system, they call an entrepreneur somebody who has any kind of equity in their business. They give them 10 to 20% equity of that local brand that they are going to run, and they get 10 to 20% of the cash flow associated with it. So it's not maybe an entrepreneur the way that we all think about entrepreneurs, but it is an entrepreneurial enough that these guys get real excited about it. It gives them a path to success. And I've met guys that are making $300,000, $350,000 a year, 30 years old, that started moving junk when they were 21 and didn't know what they wanted to do when they grew up. So that's why they've got an unlimited workforce that's loyal and dedicated. Incidentally, one of the other things they do, they're regional managers that they go out and hire. They go out to third-tier colleges, football coaches at third-tier colleges, like the ones you never heard of, that aren't making any money. And they recruit those football coaches, pay them double what they would have made as a football coach, which wasn't much in those markets, and they bring them in as regional managers. Because what are those third-tier football coaches really good at? Organizing a bunch of knuckleheads that don't know what they want to do and getting them to go do something productive. They know how to beat those guys over the head, get them excited, get them motivated. And so it's really interesting to see how these guys are doing it. So they are going to have a $1 billion brand, this group Southwind, in the home service space in the next 10 years. I'm sure of it. They're doing $200 million today, and they're growing like crazy. So that takes us, and Emily or Andy, you want me to end at what time? What would you like my hard stop to be?
See, I got 1:30 on my clock.
1:30?
Yeah.
That's what you want me to stop at, right?
Yeah, so basically you're up on that time, but keep going. We took a little bit of your time in the.
Yeah, and it's okay. I can end right here, or I can review this wheel. This wheel is basically a summary of the workbook. So if you look at that workbook, which is in pages 11 to 17, you're going to go through that workbook, and this is the process you're going to take your team through. First thing you're going to do, explain the difference between industry and business bottlenecks, and there's a place for you to fill that out on your workbook. You then go through your 5 diagnostic levers, just like I explained, and you'll come up with 5 industry bottlenecks from each diagnostic lever. So you have 25 bottlenecks. You'll circle the one on each page that pops out and seems like it's the one you want to work on. There's no science to that, picking the number one. It's just look at them and figure out it's either the DNA of our organization is just really good at solving a bottleneck like that, or, I can see how we could start to do that because it's something just pops into your brain, or there's massive leverage in this one. So you're just going to have to figure it out. But just circle the one and that you like on each page. You'll have a list of 25. You'll have your top 5, and then you pick your number 1. So now that's the bottleneck. We're now going to turn into a essential question. And we call it the essential question because it's absolutely essential that you get it right. The power is in the question. It's not in the answer. Don't jump to an answer. There'll be time for that. Get the question right first. If you ask the right metrically driven question, the answer will come to you. So the way you do that is you take your industry bottleneck and then you go through a dialogue with each other that you just say, well, why is that a problem? So let's just say, we just need 7 to 10 times more demand. If we create 7 times more demand, then we could really grow our business. Okay, well, why is demand a problem? And then you drill that down to something that might be, Oh, we just need to get 7 to 10 times more exposure with the right group of people, and then you can start to think about how to turn it into a metrically driven question. So you ask that why 5 times in order to go from a big fuzzy kind of bottleneck down to something that you're going to turn into a granular, metrically driven question. So in Brian Scudamore's case, remember, it wasn't just, hey, how do we get franchisees to be 7 to 10 times, to be profitable 7 to 10 times faster? No, that's not what he said. He said, how do we get our franchisees to go from zero to $1 million in profitable 7 to 10 times faster than our industry? So first thing they had to do is find out what's the industry norm. It's 6.5 years. Okay, now we can divide 7 to 10 to 7.5 years, and we come up with a year. Okay, so then now our metrically driven question is something that we can measure, we can go to work on, and we can improve and get closer and closer and closer. And that's the essential question. Now, once you get the essential question, metrically driven question dialed in, you then have to get your executive team totally obsessed about the essential question. Everybody focuses on one question per period that you're going to be working on this. So I start off with 90 days, and at the end of 90 days, as a group, you come back and say, do we want to keep working on this essential question? And that's okay if you do. And you might work on the same essential question for 3-4 years. Or you might go 90 or 180 days and say, you know what? We squeezed that orange. There's no more juice left. Let's move on to another essential question. And by the way, just because you come up with a metrically driven essential question does not mean you're going to find your X factor, which is that 7 to 10 times lever. But what it does mean is that you're going to be constantly looking for new and better ways to operate your business and change your industry. And if you do this enough times and you do this with enough bottlenecks, you will ultimately find that significant lever. And in my lifetime, I've had 3 X factors, and I've been doing this since I was 27 years old, and I'm 51. So it's not like they just fall out of the sky. But in the whole process, I had a whole bunch of base hits and double hits where I was trying to get that 7 to 10 times, and I got 1.2 times better, or I got 2 times better. Did I fail? No, we kept getting better, and we kept looking for a better way. And when we got the grand slam, that's our X factor. The way you get there is you make this part of your rhythm of your organization. You take your planning sessions, and you take 10% of your planning sessions, and you dedicate it to this process. Get your essential question, get your entire team obsessed about that essential question, and the way you do it is you write it on a 3x5 index card, you put it in your back pocket, and you read it to yourself 5 times a day. That helps you program your reticular activating system, which is the part of your subconscious brain that filters what you pay attention to when you're not really paying attention. And if you get your reticular activating system obsessed about your essential question and your whole team does it at the same time, you'll be absolutely amazed at what answers you find and where you find them. And then again, put this into our innovation rhythm within all of our planning sessions so that we take 10%. I'm not saying take most of your time. I'm saying if you're in a 8-hour planning session, could we take 45 minutes or 30 minutes and work on this process? Once you come up with your essential question and get your team obsessed about it, then it becomes, when we meet, we're just going to talk about what were the ideas that we've come up with in the last week and which ideas are we going to go put into action, and put a couple of them into action at a time. Continue to measure your results. Are you getting closer? Have you actually closed the gap on that? Or have you not closed the gap on it? If you do close the gap, do more of that stuff. And if you don't close the gap, stop doing it and try something else. But that's all going to come from your innovation rhythm and having a meeting structure that A, comes up with your essential question, and B, evaluates the action steps that you're going to take and measures the results of those action steps. And that's what you're going to do within your innovation rhythm by taking 10% of your meeting time and dedicating it to this process. Now, once you figure out your X factor, does that mean you're done? Put your feet up? It's all about passive residual income at that point? Heck no. Today's innovation is tomorrow's commodity. So the only thing you can guarantee you is that your competition will figure out what you've done to disrupt the industry, and they will eventually copy you. Your way you stay ahead is you're on to the next innovation before they've figured out the innovation you're in today. And so if you can create this culture of innovation, you can constantly be the disruptor like Elon Musk is. Ford and Chevy are never going to catch up to Elon Musk because he's 3, 4, 5, 10 steps ahead of them. They may come up with a nice electric car that competes with the 2010 Tesla, but he's going to be onto autonomous way faster than they will, and it'll be irrelevant. And that's what we need to be thinking about by creating this culture of innovation within our organizations. So that's why this thing's a wheel, because it never stops. This is what we do. This is what we get to do as entrepreneurs. So with that, I challenge all of you to go out and revolutionize your industry by adapting this process. If I can be helpful, the Petra people know how to get a hold of me. I love this stuff. This is what I do in my day job, which is running my entrepreneurial firms. And I also love to help companies do this as well. So if you need to just pick my brain, ask a question, whatever, send me an email. If I don't answer, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just very bad with emails because I get overwhelmed and I'm not always the best at execution. So if I don't answer you, ping me again. I want to hear from you. You're not bugging me. You're actually giving me the pleasure of helping you. So if I can be helpful in any way, just let me know. And with that, thanks for the time, Andy. Thanks for the opportunity and the floor, and hopefully I stimulated some minds to think a little bit differently about how they do things.
Well, thank you, Barrett. Hang around just a second. Barrett's email address is in chat. So if there's anything you'd like for, it's up on the screen now. So big as life. You can get in touch with Barrett anytime that you like. Barrett, as you are well aware, and some of these people maybe know this as well, but I was in the wireless telecom business, and that's a sexy way to say beepers, two-way radios, cell phones, bag phones. So I was taught in my 20s as a young entrepreneur that this wheel is the way you had to live, because my business, died every 18 months. I had to recreate myself every 18 months with something new, because wireless technology changed so quickly back between, early 90s, mid 90s, until I got out in 2011. Anybody have any specific questions they'd like to ask Barrett? You can put those in chat. Emily, do you have anything up on the screen?
No questions have come through yet.
Barrett, talk for 2 minutes about Happy Lawn and your innovation there. You discovered what you hated about your industry was measuring lawns. Like that was
so I started a lawn care company when I was in high school. That was my first entrepreneurial company, and I got it to about $2 million in revenue when I was in my 20s, and couldn't get it any beyond that. One of the reasons I couldn't get it to grow any faster or any larger than that was our customer acquisition cost was just too expensive. And I hated that about my industry. It cost us $275 in that was our customer acquisition cost in order to get a customer that gave us $400 a year. The only reason it worked at all is because we kept our customers for 5 years, so lifetime value eventually paid for that. But it was the faster we grew, the less cash we had, because it took too much time for that cash to come back to us. And so what we did is we looked at the system and said, why is it so expensive? And one of the reasons it was expensive is because people had to go out and measure lawns. We needed to know square footage of grass in order to figure out labor and fertilizer cost, and we had to send people out to do that. And I hated those people that I used to hire to do that job. They were never any good. They were hard to find, hard to manage, and I always called them chuckleheads. And so I went less chuckleheads in my company, and I looked at, and now this is going to seem simple today, but in 2002, this was rocket science. We said, how can we go from $275 to $27 as a cost per sale? I had no idea how I was going to do that, but I had the ability to ask that question, that metrically driven question. That was my essential question. So it forced us to analyze every piece of the sales process, and we looked at, so what if we didn't have to have chuckleheads? Because that's a big bottleneck. It's a big cost. It takes time, and it costs money. If we could get rid of the chuckleheads, then we could really grow. And so we figured out how to use tax map data, aerial photography, and GIS imaging to actually measure lawns through a web platform that we built in 2002. And again, like Google Earth didn't exist. We were leasing maps. We used to lease these aerial maps from a company called Globe Explorer. It was $50,000 a year just for Baltimore. Now, today, we get them for free from Google Earth. It seems pretty simple. But back then, we were the first company to do this. We patented that process. Once I figured that out, our company went 2 million, 5 million, 8 million, 10 million. It scaled rapidly. We could have grown much faster. I couldn't hire and train the guys in the trucks quickly enough, and that was our next bottleneck. But so I used this process to solve that problem. That was my first real X factor, and that's why Vern gets me to tell this story a lot. I didn't tell it today because I was trying to be fast, but that's an example of how we did this.
I think personal experience is a powerful share, and that became the value in the organization when you ultimately sold it.
Yeah, we sold that business to ServiceMaster as part of a big roll-up they were doing, and they needed our platform to basically change how they measured lawns, and we got a whole bunch of money for it.
That's beautiful, man. There are a few questions. I saw this one. It says, what can you do if your idea is forward-thinking so much that your potential customers don't see the need for it yet, but you know the need is coming? And I'd like to speak to this before you do, Barrett. 2 days ago, I was at a conference in San Diego. I was there yesterday and the day before, but the first day, the founder of Shazam spoke to us, and he was telling the Shazam story. If everybody's familiar with Shazam, you push the button and it tells you what song it is, and raise your hand. Like everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say Shazam. He started Shazam 10 years before the iPhone came out. 10 years. So I'm just addressing this particular question. When there was a Nokia, remember the little Nokia crap? I was in the cell phone business, so I remember every damn phone model that there was. And there was this little tiny Nokia phone. You would you would call a phone number, hold the phone up to the sound, the music sound, and then it would recognize your cell phone number, take the cell phone number, send you a text back to the phone with the title of the song. That's how the whole thing started. And now it's, cool and pretty, and it's totally different now. But all the pain that they went through for a decade before there was ever the device that would actually serve the need to the consumer of the solution itself. So what is your take on that particular question, Barrett? And then I'll turn it back over to Emily.
It's a great question, and often the pioneers are the ones get the arrows in the back because they're too early. And I'm a definite. I have that experience in my current business. So I started this business. We're in the organic fertilizer business, but more specifically, we grow microbes, bacteria, fungi, amoeba, and protozoa that make soil much more productive. So we need less fertilizer and less chemicals. Well, when I discovered this technology, I thought it was revolutionary and it was going to change my industry. I sold my company to, as we talked about, ServiceMaster, and made a bunch of money. Took that and invested it into making this new microbiological technology that I thought the world needed. Well, fertilizer was cheap, and my product, although it was somewhat competitive to fertilizer, there wasn't enough pain involved in what people were doing already to have wide scale adoption. Now we still grew the business, but man, our customer acquisition cost, the amount of sales and marketing we had to do, the amount of education we needed to do was painful. And I thought this was going to be a $100 million business overnight, as Andy would tell you, because he was with me when I almost went out of business a couple of times through this evolution, because we didn't become a $100 million business overnight. We spent a bunch of money developing it, and then we didn't get the revenue as quickly as we wanted to. But what my dad says, he says, what you're really good at is focus, perseverance, and resilience. And I think you have to have that as an entrepreneur. I believed in it. I kept at it. In the last 3 years, fertilizer has 3x'd in price. At the same time, New Green Deal and other things are putting a lot of pressure on large fertilizer users and the runoff that they're creating. And there's also a lot of technology that's allowing what we're doing right now to be measured more specifically that didn't exist 10 years ago. And so I got in early. The good news is I know more than anybody else does in the space because I was in early. Bad news is it took me a lot longer. I got a lot more gray hair and I got a lot less cash in the bank because I had to wait for my opportunity and I had to constantly scrap my way through. But right now we're doubling revenue, and we've doubled prices and doubling revenue. We're doubling acres and we doubled prices because the market is now really, really ready for this. They need it. It's desperate. I was waiting in line. Now, if I came at it today, because now's the right time, it'd be 4 years before it was ready for prime time, and maybe the time would pass me by. So all I can tell you is just use your gut. You got to be careful. You got to straddle, not give up your day job while you're giving what you do today and making money while you're developing that new innovation, because it may not be ready. The world might not be ready for it, but if you believe in it and you keep at it, at some point they will be ready, and the time will be right, and you can take it.
So, Em, we probably have time for one more question, and then we'll go to break.
What types of people in your organization should you include in the conversations to discover your X factor?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I like to start with the executive team. And the reason I like to start with the executive team is because in the beginning, this is like operating a stick shift car, if any of you learned how to do that. In the beginning, it's going to feel clunky and awkward. You're going to stall it out, and you're going to think, I'm never going to be able to figure this out. But if you, as an executive team, if you stay at it, and it'll probably take you 90 days or so to kind of make this feel a little bit more fluid to you. And next thing you know, just like where your stick shift, you're shifting gears with your elbow and making a phone call and doing things you're not supposed to be doing. But you can do that once you learn how to drive that stick shift. So I want you to get fluid with this process with your executive team. Once you think you are fluid, which could be 90 days, it could be a year, it could be a year and a half, everybody's gonna feel differently. But once you think you've really kind of got this and you've had some experience, then I would say bring it to the next level and the next level, and introduce it to each level of the organization, in a time period so that each group can get it. You're going to get a lot of power from the frontline employee, but don't take it to the frontline employee when you don't know what you're doing, because you're just going to confuse them. So get it right, and then over the course of a year to 2 to 3, depending on how big your company is, get it through the rest of your organization, and use that frontline employee to get some really good innovation and ideas. They often can see things that we can't see because they deal with the problems every single day and deal with customers every single day.